Well, how's everybody doing? You know, my friend from New York told me that being an activist is like a death sentence because activism is very stressful. We deal with a lot of crap that we don't have to deal with. And I want to say that, you know, I'm here to disagree with them and say that I come here to present tools for you guys to improve your lives and make sure that we live a long life because, you know, what good are we for the world if we're not good enough for ourselves, right? Now, as a fitness trainer for over 10 years, I've seen how my profession, as well as the medical system, has failed to make a significant impact on the obesity and health crisis that has gripping the world. And, you know, after taking a step back and looking at the problems from a completely different standpoint, I realized that if we want to optimize our health and maintain equilibrium as a species, we need to make biological adaptations to anticipate what is going to be a storm of technological and social change over the coming century.
I said, I don't know what's going on here.
There's one thing that we all know. As Jacque Fresco said, this shit has got to go.
Yeah.
Now, our so-called modern society has created a dysfunctional and unsustainable paradigm that is clearly at the root of our global crisis. And while technology has progressed in human culture in the 21st century, epidemic disease, depression, addiction, and other health-related problems are higher than ever before. This wasn't the case for most of them. They oriented their behavior according to the signals that nature gave them. The sun signaled their brains when to go to sleep, when to wake up. The foods they ate were limited to what was available in their natural setting and according to the seasonal cycles, and they were very physically active. Now compare that with the culture of today. It's a completely different picture, right? Night and day no longer dictate human behavior. We stay indoors most of our lives, away from the sun, surrounded by artificial lights that tell us, to our brain, that it's daytime when it's actually in the middle of the night, midnight. We can now eat a banana imported from Chile during winter at the Arctic Circle because of globalization, right? And we are highly physically inactive. I'm here to argue that these changes are detrimental to our future evolutionary fitness, since they are biological mismatches to the millions of years of evolution that nature has hardwired into us. In many ways, we're throwing nature a curveball, and it has no way to respond to this other than the way of disease and chronic illness. Let's make one thing clear. Technology is here to stay, and it should be that way. There is no going back. But what society shouldn't do is to distort our original biological adaptations, and that is what it's currently doing. The market paradigm has used technology as a tool for furthering its own ends, while making society more vulnerable to epidemic disease. As we all know, Mother Nature is a dictatorship, and we either listen to her demands or ignore it and suffer the consequences of pain, illness, and injury. And what is natural law at the most fundamental level? Well, quantum mechanics and quantum physics is going to help us out along this talk, because the weird and spooky actions that happen in this micro realm really dictate what happens in biological systems. Particles in this realm is phased through physical barriers in what's called quantum tunneling. There is a wave-particle duality where light can exist in particle and waveform at the same time. And quantum biology, in all its sophistication, has shown that the solution to our problems, our health problems, is actually very simple. And it's simply out there in nature. Life runs on 3 quantum laws, and these are light, water, and magnetism. And as you'll see, these are the most important factors to consider when it comes to optimizing our biology. These 3 laws are also why Earth is full of life, and Mars is a dead desert planet. Mars has plenty of water at the poles, and gets lots of sunlight, but it's missing one of the 3 key ingredients, and that's a strong magnetic core. Now, complex life emerged when there was an increase in ultraviolet radiation from our sun 600 million years ago during what's called the Cambrian explosion. And as I'll explain, light is not only very important for our health, but if the sun's energy didn't increase in spectral density, Earth would still be populated by only archaea and bacteria. From quantum mechanics, we know that eukaryotic biology only responds to the wave aspect of sunlight. And this non-linear light is also what is used in our modern fiber optics and communication technology. Our cells are optimized to work with sunlight, which is part of the electromagnetic spectrum that is present on Earth. And that's what we call native EMF. Man has figured out how to use the parts of the spectrum that are not optimized for biology, things like radio frequencies and microwaves. These are called non-native EMF because they're not found in the natural environment on their own. They include communication devices and many artificial forms of light, such as the lights from our phones and computers. Now, the scientific literature has found that long-term exposure to non-native EMFs has severe consequences, and the proliferation of these technologies has coincided with the explosion of disease like cancer and Alzheimer's. And the question is, how to protect ourselves with the use of technology while staying healthy in a technologically dominated world. Because like I said, I'm not against technology. I'm just saying that there needs to be a way of bringing it into our life without it actually having an adverse effect on our health. Our digital culture is also making us more antisocial and isolated from each other. But as far as this physiological effects, we're going to need to look at a key factor, and that is modern biology's failure to consider the importance of bacteria to evolutionary history. This is a mitochondria. It is a powerhouse of the cell and responsible for generating the energy in our bodies. It was originally a bacteria that merged with living cells billions of years ago in an event called endosymbiosis. Without it, complex life would not exist, since it created the energy, the extra energy, that allowed life to evolve organs like the heart and the brain and everything else. All life forms are bioelectric, and every living organism on Earth runs on a DC electric charge that is sustained through connection with the sun's radiant energy. In the book, The Body Electric, Dr. Robert Becker provides tremendous evidence to the electromagnetic nature of life and having a negative charge in your body is critical for good health. So the more electrons you have, and the better off your health will be. The more positive your charge, the worse off, since you have too many protons. Now, why is that? Because mitochondria are photoelectric powerhouses, which means that they are highly sensitive and responsive to light. They thrive off certain light frequencies and suffer under others. And they use electrons as their input in what's called the electron chain transport. This is how they generate energy. As quantum mechanics tells us, they tunnel electrons in what's called quantum tunneling of electrons between stations called respiratory proteins. This is why we need lots of electrons for our mitochondria to function. In medicine, there's a term for having too much of a positive charge, and that's called inflammation. And you'll see how different diseases are simply different variations and different expressions of the charge deficit in your body. Everyone here knows about psychosocial stress, and one of the things that it does to us is lower our electric potential. All animals replenish their DC electric charge and get rid of excess positive charge buildup through contact with the earth. This is called being grounded, and we are chronically disconnected from the earth's energizing properties since we have covered the earth's surface with materials that insulate that charge. There is another connection and a wireless connection that we have to the sun. How do we know that? Well, there's this famous dude who gave us the photoelectric effect, which said that light is actually a particle that can only interact with the electron. Einstein showed the significance of electrons in photosynthesis, and that the entire food web depends on the interaction between light and electrons. Trees don't eat, right? Because they have a direct connection to the ground and the sun. And the foods that we eat that's provided through photosynthesis is literally like a secondary mechanism of light interaction. So, food is basically a different variation of electron programming. And that's why I say that globalization is a terrible idea, because foods are coming from different light environments that are not native to our light environment. And this creates a biological mismatch that our ancestors did not experience. And this is why I think it's wrong to talk about food only in terms of carbs, proteins, or fats, or whether they're organic. Because remember, all electrons in the universe are the same. They're all identical. What makes them different is the type of light that they interact with. Our ancestors did not eat avocados during the Arctic winter, and the record shows that they were remarkably healthy. Again, globalization is a disaster, not only on an environmental level, but it is also not helping our biology. Let's move on to light's direct effect on our health. What we know about sunlight is that it has an equal ratio of blue, red, and UV light. The blue aspect is what wakes us up in the morning. The red regenerates our cells, and UV produces vitamin D. All modern light, especially LEDs, have 100% blue and no red in them. We are not biologically designed to see blue light by itself. Blue light actually does not exist in nature without red. It has to be counteracted with that different spectrum. And what do we know about melatonin? It regulates our circadian mechanism, right? And blue light by itself has been shown to destroy melatonin. When you see how different our light exposure is now compared to thousands, even 100 years ago, what pattern do you see? Less exposure to natural light and spending more time indoors under more artificial blue light. Maybe that's the reason why sleeping disorders and depression are at an all-time high. Our society has allowed the setting for people to isolate themselves from each other and live indoors, something that our ancestors did not do. And our ancestors were always in nature. They're always interacting with nature, they're grounded, they're immersed in it. And we're living a very disconnected reality right now. Now, when melatonin is destroyed, DHA is also lost in cell membranes. DHA is a fatty acid that is linked to the energy in our cells. And when it drops, so does our DC electric charge and our ability to regenerate. This is why Dr. Becker's work is so critical. If you understand that bone works on semiconduction and that it can be affected by non-native EMFs, then you can realize that, you can see how so many people who have a serious illness also have some form of osteoporosis. It's a very interesting link that we can make. DHA is not made endogenously. It's made endogenously. It is not. It has to be acquired through the environment, and it's the only fat in 600 million years of eukaryotic evolution that can turn sunlight into a DC electric current. And where is DHA highest in our body? In the eye. What goes through the eye? Sunlight. And as you can see, this connection controls our circadian biology. We have what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which basically runs the whole mechanism. And the eye is actually a clock. It's more than even a camera. Even if you're blind, you can still use the eye clock mechanism because it works with all the other clocks in your body. What do I mean by clock? It just means the timing mechanism of everything that works. Like your heart has a rhythm, your kidneys, liver, everything works due to a clock mechanism. And the eye clock has to work faster than the other clocks in your body. But the thing is, this clock up here needs sunlight in order to spin. We need a higher amount of DHA in the eye than anywhere else in the body, including the brain. And it has to do, again, with physics. Einstein's theory of relativity explains how a GPS works. The atomic clock in a satellite has to work 38 microseconds faster than the GPS down here on Earth, on our phones, because gravity bends light in a process called gravitational lensing. If satellites don't work faster than our phones, GPS will be offset, it will not function, and instead of finding your coffee shop in Frankfurt, you're probably going to end up somewhere in like China or something. I mean, it's that adverse, the effect of it. So the eye has to have lots of DHA in order for the clock to work faster than the clocks in our liver, kidney, and everything else. If that doesn't happen, your biochemistry will be off. And what happens when arrivals and deliveries come all at the same time in the cell? Chaos, inflammation. What do we call a condition where the liver clock works faster than the eye clock? Diabetes. And it all starts with light. This is why eating local and seasonal is so important, because the light signaling that causes a plant to make a fruit needs to be the same as the light signaling that happens in our eye. It's so important. You can be healthy, you can look healthy, you can look like an Adonis your whole life, but you can be a marshmallow on the inside because everything is breaking down because you're not maximizing your photosynthetic yield. And we need to have a new science in nutrition that measures photosynthetic yield. We don't have that right now. We only talk about carbs, proteins, and fats. Now, what's water's role in all this? We all know that plants take water, CO2, and sunlight and make sugar. What we might not know is that mitochondria take sugar and make CO2 and water. So they reverse the process. It's amazing. Water surrounds the respiratory proteins of mitochondria, and since mitochondria use the respiratory proteins to tunnel electrons across, then the water that surrounds our cells is actually a battery. So the most important water for life is the one that your mitochondria create, not the one that you find at the health store. Remember that. Mitochondria and chlorophyll, chloroplasts, they're very similar in structure and function. Just that one thing that they do is opposite in nature. Energy production is most efficient when our cells are hydrated and when respiratory proteins are close to one another. So respiratory proteins, the stations, they have to be close because it makes it easier for the energy to cross. And anything that dehydrates our cells and increases the distance between respiratory proteins should be our number one enemy. And guess what dehydrates and pushes respiratory proteins apart and also destroys the DHA in the eye? Blue light. Blue light pushes our respiratory proteins apart, and there's a medical term for that. That's called heteroplasmy. The higher the heteroplasmy, the less efficient your mitochondria will be in producing energy. And what does physics tell us? It tells us that anything that spreads out loses energy. So if you look at an obese person, or if you look at a sprained ankle, or you look at a dying star, they all have the same thing in common. They're spreading out. Your ankle is swollen, you're injured, it's spreading out. An obese person is in an unhealthy state, he is losing energy, he's spreading out. The sun, the star. If a star is dying, it's spreading out because of losing energy. They all have that in common. So actually, this is an amazing concept that shows how everything is very similar in nature. Dr. Doug Wallace is a world expert on mitochondrial DNA. He discovered that we inherit our mitochondrial genome from our mother, and that children born to mothers with bad mitochondrial dynamics are more likely to get sick sooner. It turns out that our mitochondrial genome is more important than our nuclear genome in predicting disease. and that modern medicine has focused on the wrong genome. He also found that high heteroplasmy rates coincide with cancer, and that cancer and other autoimmune disorders are likely mitochondrial metabolic disease and not genetic. But the medical paradigm, as we all know, only cares about nuclear DNA. They don't put any funding toward mitochondrial research, or very little. Mitochondria are the engine. So if you think about like a high-performance vehicle, think about like a Ferrari. What do you want to do? If you have a Ferrari, what do you want to focus on improving? The fuel for the Ferrari or the engine? Right? On the fuel and not the engine. And that's downright idiotic. It's never going to work. And as we all know, our system doesn't want to cure anything because that's a very bad business move, right? Truth is, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are the same disease. The only difference is how much heteroplasmy shows up in the cell. And it all starts with the light that enters your eye. John Odd was a photobiologist who was hired actually by Disney to observe the effects of certain drugs on cell behaviors. He made a startling discovery that changing the filters over the camera lens from one color to another had a greater effect on the cells than the drugs. Cells behave much differently under different colored lights. That's an amazing discovery that he made, and I recommend everybody to check this book out because there's tons of studies in that book that show the different things that happens to your body under light. And there are numerous human and animal studies that have shown a correlation between chronic blue light exposure or the lack of natural light and disease. One study on rats showed that putting the animals in a dark room for an extended period of time forced them to actually drink alcohol. Researchers call this darkness-induced drinking phenomenon. And when we look at industrial capitalist society and what is done to our connection to nature, we see that we're chronically dehydrated, living in an ocean of non-native EMFs. We want to be energy efficient and save money with our use of LEDs while paying for it with our health. That's being penny-wise and pound-foolish, right? Every person on average owns 4 to 7 or sometimes 10 to 15 of these devices. So if you're sitting in a train like I do when I'm in New York, go to Brooklyn, in Brooklyn, go to work in a subway station, I'm surrounded by a bunch of these people and they're all using their phones and we're all literally cooking ourselves alive with bi-directional microwaves. And with the emergence of 5G networks, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Another thing that blue light does to us, it destroys dopamine. And being in a low dopamine state, people become fixated on stimulating pleasure centers of the brain, losing focus on what's important. So when somebody's in a low dopamine state, they become impulsive and check their social media constantly for dopamine boosts, which actually lowers their dopamine, right? When that happens, they come right back to the phone for another dopamine boost in an activity that actually destroys dopamine, further destroying dopamine long term. So it becomes a vicious cycle where people are trying to raise their dopamine levels with an activity that actually kills dopamine. So this is one of the reasons why spreading social awareness about the Zeitgeist movement to people out there is so difficult, because everyone's essentially an energy vampire. We're all looking for things to make our dopamine levels go up. And any information that you give somebody that's not going to give an immediate reward is actually psychologically painful and unpleasant. So they have a very hard time realizing trends. I'm sorry to say they become obedient idiots. And I hate to be condescending, but this is kind of what we're becoming. We're becoming a real-life version of The Walking Dead. In the US, Steve Jobs, I don't know if you guys know about that guy, Steve Jobs. He's essentially idolized some hero for getting everybody addicted to these bullshit phones. And with nobody paying any attention to what it's doing to our health, these tech companies are actually literally making a killing in their profits. And this is unprecedented. An entire generation of people who are around so much harmful technology from such a young age that I'm firmly convinced that iPhone addiction is going to be a real serious and lethal epidemic in years to come. The beautiful truth is that we're designed by nature to be addicted to sunlight, which makes a chemical in our brain actually that's called beta endorphin. And beta endorphin is a natural opioid and the only one that doesn't make you addicted to other opiates. And unfortunately, our society has disconnected us from the source. Salmonella and mitochondria are both bacteria at their core. Now what happens when you put them in a highly energized environment that's not connected to the light, water, and magnetism here on Earth? they undergo massive growth. This has been demonstrated in space, where the light from the sun is very different down here on Earth. In space, bacteria grow like crazy, since there is no control mechanism for growth, and that's the Earth's magnetic field. There is no magnetic field of the Earth in space. And what is cancer? Cancer is a loss of growth control in cells. Might this be the reason why in a blue lit and microwave planet like ours, the way we made it, our mitochondria undergo this type of change to cause our cells to get cancer, for us to get sick? Our society is literally creating an environment that's optimal for cancer to grow. We're creating an alien planet with an alien blue sun that is not optimal for us. And if that is not a fast way of destroying our biology and getting autoimmune disease, I really don't know what is. John McMurtry called capitalism a cancer, a lifeline, distorted system which overlooks human needs, instead focusing on the movement of money. This is the reason why our technology is harming us, because no consideration is being given as to whether it's sustainable for our biology. As long as the paradigm stays, shit will continue selling and will remain that way. We are becoming increasingly disconnected from nature, forced to live and work indoors under harmful lights, shielded away from the healing properties of the earth, and looking to our phones and computers for emotional relief instead of each other and our communities. This can actually be seen as a form of structural violence, since it's systemic and not individual. The solution is not to patch things up with medicine, but to return to nature and to learn from our hunter-gatherers ancestors who, despite having a more arduous and difficult life, are much happier and healthier than us because they have stayed connected all their lives. Obviously, solutions are going to be hard. On an individual level, it's going to be tricky. As a social movement, we're looking to change the structure of society, right? But I think on an individual level, there's things that we can do because, like I said, if you guys are activists, I want you to live long, healthy lives. We want to be around long enough, right? At least to tell the naysayers, I told you so, right? At least. So, you know, that's why, I made a crazy, I drive my friends and family crazy because the changes that I've made for my life seem ridiculous. That's why I wear these glasses. These are not the night shades. These are blue blockers. They block the blue light that comes in. So I suggest everybody to get one of these. The list is out there, things that you can do. But, you know, if we just get more sunlight, get more connected to the ground, earth yourself, and minimize the blue light, it would have tremendous benefits for your health. And even on a personal level, I know how hard that can be because when you're like me, have to rush to your fucking bullshit slave job in the morning, 6 in the morning, there's not really much time to stay connected, right? I mean, you know, this is why we have to advocate for structural change. And in the book Looking Forward, Jacque Fresco presented a radical thought exercise of how the future society would look like if a new socioeconomic model was put in place. And what I want for us, all of us, is to envision creative ways in which we can apply system solutions to a future society, or even to a society of today, where a proper connection with nature is maintained, and in harmony with technology. But realization is the first step in adaptation, right? And in my view, humans need to be not only socially and intellectually aware, but also biologically adaptive to their surroundings. Because, like I said, it's our flexibility of thought that makes us unique, right? It's gonna be hard because the market paradigm is pushing for the opposite. You know, like everyone's and their kid is having an iPhone now at like the age of 3. And like I said, it's not like I'm not telling you to throw your iPhones away. I'm just saying you have to make individual solution preparation, and also you must spread this knowledge to other people as fast as you can, because we really don't have much time. With the 5G network coming, it's going to be scary. And as a final message, let's try to improve our connection to nature and take care of our mitochondria, because at the end of the day, what good are you for the world if you're not good enough for yourself, right? I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Try talking.
Okay. So we're going to the model building where Jacque is going to explain.
There's one model building.
Okay.
This is a canal bed. Yeah, it's the basis of the canal. This machine would have laser beams to melt the earth underneath it into what they call glass, but it's a spongy glass. And the buildings are made in here, in the dry dump, but they're made on the float. This is a deep thing, like a boat.
Okay.
The buildings are constructed on a float, and when all the buildings are finished, we flood it with salt water from the ocean. We float the buildings all the way out to where you want them. Then we use water jets under the building. That means the building is free to float it on the water jets, and it takes 1 pound to move a ton of weight. So we strip the whole building off right in on it. These are the research labs.
Oh, okay.
They're built along the canal. And this machine brings this gadget and lowers it over the canal. But we don't lower it over this canal. We bend it and go back so it doesn't obstruct the flow of traffic. These are photoelectric cells on the glass, and they convert the infrared rays to energy. Mm-hmm. So the water evaporates inside this, condenses on the ceiling and flows over, and we collect that water for drinking water. That's how these cells makes one.
Okay.
But we have other techniques too. We don't have to lift the building up and put it on there. We assemble the building on there. And a machine like this goes all along these buildings, putting in the windows and everything else. And this carries the center of gravity, like it carries it to where it goes, and then it lowers it over the canals. That's how we make our drinking water.
Is that the only job of this machine, to carry these instruments?
Yes, carry these units.
And how much would these instruments weigh, approximately?
I'd say about 2,000 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So it's very easy to hydraulically lift it. Now, even the concrete, I don't know if I showed you, the concrete's about that thick, but the inside is full of air bubbles. We put chemical agents in the concrete, little pills, and that expands the gas. Only in the middle, but the concrete is solid on the walls, but the inside is like a sponge.
Okay. What's the purpose of that?
Make it lighter in weight.
Lighter in weight, but strong anyway.
Oh yeah, strong.
So it preserves material. So the buildings are assembled on these dry docks, right?
Yeah.
And this shoots the laser.
Yeah, before this, there's another machine that digs the canals. It can change its shape and digs all the soil and folds it up on the side. So the side of the canal prevents flooding, and you have a deeper canal.
Once the canals are dug, this shoots a laser that'll make it into what?
It makes it into a solid surface.
Solid surface.
Instead of mixing concrete, it's like what erupts in a volcano.
Yeah.
It's called obsidian, and that's a material that's made by volcanoes, melting rock and everything else into a base of the canal. And we bring the salt water in, we flood it, and if there's ever any flood or rain, we direct all this water to, you know what strip mining is? Made big holes in the earth where we did mining, and they look ugly. So we use that for storing flood waters.
Oh, okay.
So we have that water in case we need it for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we don't just have flooding of buildings. And most of the buildings that are in the flood region are capable of floating. So we don't lose the building.
Yeah.
They can float up. Like the lecture hall you were in, where we live.
Yes.
And this is 3 domes joined together, see it? And this is what's inside.
And you pour the cement material over and underneath it?
Underneath it first, and tough so it doesn't fall through. So we do the bottom first, and that's it. We have a slot in here, so the windows go up in the slot, and you don't need to connect it with screws or anything. See that slot?
Yeah.
The windows go up in there, be higher, and go up in there, and they lock. We don't want anything sticking out. We want to mold it all in one. Okay. You have a power failure for a week. You'll lose all your food. But this keeps the lights going and the refrigerator.
But in the future also, there's probably going to be less refrigerators in homes and more restaurants where people go to eat,
exactly.
right? Okay.
Exactly.
It's more efficient that way.
Yes. And this is a bathroom with molded sink and toilet bowl right on the shower. And the wastewater from the sink goes down the drain, but goes in a tube and goes around and fills this closet.
Yes.
In the back that you don't see.
Yes.
And you flush the John with it. And the bathrooms, like this sink, will have a box here for flushing the John. The wastewater sink flows into this box.
Yes.
And you flush the John with it. Now this is bent. It's more than that. See it? Toilet bowl, sink, and shower, all one molded.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
And I told you what we do for the blind, you remember?
You have this echolocation style sound.
They hear at the open door because the sound bounces back.
Yes.
Just like a bat. A bat has very poor sight.
Yes.
But it can avoid everything in a way. It's sound feedback. We're always working on heart disease, cystic fibrosis, whatever problems people have, we work on to try to solve those problems. And the doctors and all the people are taken care of. They're given what they need. But the bed sheets go around the bed with rollers. In the morning when you get up, it rolls the bed sheet down underneath it where it's cleaned and dried, and then it rolls back up. Do you understand?
Yes.
If there's anything you don't understand, you're supposed to interrupt me.
Okay, I will, yes.
This is called the Ford Tri-Motor. It was a transport before the airline is today.
Yes.
That's what they used to take passengers up in. This is called a Jenny. It's a training plane for World War I.
Oh, okay.
And I have to show kids that it doesn't begin like this. This is a late airplane.
Yeah.
Maybe the next 20 years they'll look like this. But I have to show them it goes through different stages to get there. And this is a standard helicopter. And it's turned from the middle. There's a motor under there that turns this blade. And it's very hard to turn it from the middle. But you put a small jet engine on the tip of the blades. I make it big here. Only I made it big. It'd be half that size. And that blows the blades around from the outside, which means has less torque.
Less torque.
Torque is.
Yes.
And the center has two weights that move up like very fast. And that keeps the center from turning. So the center is stationary while the blades go around. Do you understand?
Yes.
And it has no surface. Like, the only thing that lifts this are the blades. The body is dead weight. And the blades turn this way, but the body tends to turn the other way. And this fan, see it?
Yes.
Holds it back. So you get a little bit of oscillation like that. With this, you don't get.
You don't get any oscillation.
It spins and takes off like that, then it shuts and moves forward. Thrust comes out the back. And this one has the same probe that the trains have. It discharges electrons. It causes the air molecules to open up so there's less air friction.
Air friction.
Yeah.
Displaces the air.
Projections, each particle, air molecule repels one another. So there's more open space.
Great. Wow.
And instead of cutting into this and making ailerons, you know what they are?
Yeah.
The flaps that move.
Flaps on the airplane.
We have a rudder that moves. We have no rudder that moves. We discharge electrons from the wingtip, and that makes it bank. You don't need to cut any of the surfaces, but flaps that move.
Why do the airplanes of today don't put these mechanisms that discharge electrons on them? Why don't they adapt that already?
I don't know. They never got there yet. It will in the future. It's much cheaper to make one round roof running this way than all of these. And these are floating domes, float on water. And the middle of the dome has a glass, maybe 6 feet in diameter. You can see the bottom of the water. But you can live in these domes. And if you're away and it begins to rain, it just closes over. The raindrops activate the circuit to close. So you don't have to go back, oh my God, the porch is going to be wet when I get back there. You can't own 10 acres or 50 acres because you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
You're going to eventually die and it's going to belong to somebody else.
Yeah.
Don't give a shit what your loyalties are, or your beliefs.
Yeah.
You must eventually join together.
Yes.
And if you don't, we'll kill each other. And that's transportation of fluids, like oil or gas or whatever you want. These are different tubes to transfer different fluids. So the animals can migrate through that. They're not cut out by that tube in the way.
Now, if people are living in a house and they want to go to another part of the world, can they contact somebody from another part of the world? Be like, do you want to swap houses?
Yes.
Okay.
They're free. They don't. Later on into the Venus Project, they won't have jobs anymore. So you can go back to school, study whatever you want.
Yeah.
Art, music, anything you're on. And that's up to you, what you want to do with your life. The chair is made this way. Your ass is round.
Yeah.
And the back has to be shaped like the human back.
Yes.
And this is a chair in the future. Without any surface that does nothing. Some of the furniture will look like that. But it's made like that with memory metal. Then it's flattened out and shipped flat.
Yeah.
You can get more.
And once you heat it, it'll go right back to shape.
Yes.
Great.
And this is other chairs that are molded like that. You know what I mean? And this is a kitchen unit, if you wanted it, in your dome. The refrigerator's round, so the shelves rotate, otherwise you can't get the stuff in the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you understand that? And the shelving comes down. You put the dishes in and push button and it goes back up. This is a launching unit. You know what that means?
Launching
Put
unit.
an airplane out and launch it. It doesn't need to take off. If there's somebody lost at sea or some accident on a boat, that can launch a plane. And they go out there and pick up the people that are stranded.
And I have a question about the aircraft. What energy do they use? What kind of energy do they use to move around? Electrical energy.
Always.
And is that battery or capacitors?
What's that?
Is that going to be done by batteries or capacitors, the energy for the airplane?
Possibly a new type of capacitor.
New type of capacitor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because batteries don't have a surge. Capacitor can give you a surge of power. You remember these cars?
Yes, yes.
They can't touch each other. Streamline means no interruption surface. And then in the future, all the windows will be flush, not recessed like. And all the trains have a probe on them. I don't have it on this one.
Yeah.
But it has a probe that sticks out and discharges electrons. If you put them in a vacuum tube and there's an accident, the tube cracks open, it'll suck the air out of the train, people will die. So we don't suck the air out of the tube. We just use a probe to part the air molecule. And remember this clubhouse?
Yeah.
You have your golf clubs in there. You select what you want, you play, and you leave them there so other people can use it. Otherwise, your closet's full of crapola.
What about these buildings? Why you make them?
Curvilinear, which is stronger than the straight wall. So if you curve the surfaces, they're almost self-supporting. If you make it flat, you have to put struts on it. That's a power generator for the West Indies. If you have an island and two generators, the wind blows through there, turning them, they generate electricity. For the islands, we don't want to ship fuel out there that they burn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Instead of designing a building and filling it in, we do the interior job and we cover it. And that's what a building will look like.
Oh, okay. And what are these why would you need these cables to hold this?
To hold up the ceiling if you want to exhibit airplanes or things, you don't want any struts in the way.
Yeah.
So it's for exhibition buildings. That might be an agricultural building where they grow food inside. That way, if you have a drought or a flood, you're not going to get your food on time. But if you're interested in astronomy and other things that have a different type of building.
Oh, okay.
So each building will be different depending on the internal function. Now this machine that you see here can carry these sections which are precast concrete, and it lays them down in place so that you can make as long a production line as you need. The light comes in this way. The
Yeah.
sun rises and sets in that direction.
Okay.
So then you have windows here. Let me explain these things.
Yeah, so
These are robots. This is to carry pipes. We don't worry and say, who's going to carry pipes, or what kind of machine that? And this is a machine that can carry segments of a pipe. And this can carry different shapes.
Okay.
And this machine can grab buildings of different designs.
okay.
What's this?
You're caught and,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay.
Carry
These are
airplanes and
different
buildings.
machines to do different jobs. It's a space station. I don't want people out in space because
Yeah.
then you have to bring them water and food.
Yeah.
So on Earth we have a panel that can control everything inside that. So if you want to do research in chemistry, you have a rocket ship bring the chemicals up here
Oh, okay.
and you do the manipulation on Earth. You don't have to send people out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you send people out there, you got problems. When they run low on energy, they go to a charging area and plug themselves in.
Plug themselves in, okay.
Yeah. And this is to carry oxygen, nitrogen, whatever you need down on. If you land on the moon and break the landing gear, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So we send one ship there first that's automated, and then you land only if it's in good shape, so that you have a way of back in case you need anything. You don't have to go back to the Earth to get oxygen or spare parts. They're in these things. This is free form. When you bend it around like that, it can carry more weight. I think we covered pretty much.
I think that's everything.
See, kids don't know. If you show them an airplane, they say that's an airplane. But they don't know that it changes with time. That's what I had this for.
Yeah.
So the kids, is that the final airplane? No, it's not. It's just another transition. Those are models.
Thank you, Jacque.
Now, sometimes,
Yes.
as is normal, people like to live in individual domes. But in the future, they'll live in apartments. Because there's dental, medical center in the apartment.
In the
And
apartment.
shopping. Just like an ocean liner.
Yeah.
It has everything you need. You can go shopping for clothing or a box of candy for somebody. Whatever you want is in here. So I think the people of the future will give up living in individual houses. They'll live in mass housing
Yeah.
that has everything.
Yeah. But they have to give up the selfish immaturity that they
I
have.
can't immediately change everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's to accommodate existing values.
Yes.
But in the future, instead of having a library and a camera center, it'll be part of this building. This is glass building for growing food. Hydroponics, if you don't have good soil. We don't depend on it. There might be a whole area with lousy soil, like Egypt.
Yeah.
They've exhausted the soil over the years, so we need hydroponics and air plants that grow in the air. And we need fish farms on the land, big circular fish farms where we raise fish. You don't need oceans.
Yeah, nets and all that
You can
crap.
raise them in the ocean and on the land.
And this water is going to be used, right? This water?
A canal for shipping elements of the structures and then putting them in place.
Oh, so the dry dock, like you explained, will be on the outside of the city.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It also keeps rats from getting out of the city. They don't like to swim in water.
What if they want to go from under into the city? They can't do that?
Oh, this is a bridge. And for certain sounds keep insects and animals out of the city.
Wow, good. Ultrasound.
Yeah. We work on the range of sound, so we have good control over it. And these are basically hardware for building models, different models.
Yes.
I used to have a big collection of old stainless steel screws and things. Well, the other building.
So I'm not here to, like I said, I'm not here to detract or put down or destroy whatever anyone's doing, you know? I'm here to basically just step here and give my ideas and hopefully have you guys maybe think outside the box, you know? we can do things in the interim, during the transitionary process of doing projects to help people in general. But I would say in the long term, in the long goal of sustainability, human survival, human fitness, we have to think outside the box. We have to think about different, systems engineering, So basically, for example, unemployment. People have, there's large rates of unemployment, there's large rates of poverty, people don't have money to buy things. Okay, there are some projects right now in Europe, there's certain things happening where there's a trading communities where people keep all their tools and all their material goods, certain material goods that are for general use, inside like a shed, and everybody has a key to that shed. So let's say you want to use a hammer, you want to use a camera, you want to use a bicycle.
Breathing printer.
Yeah, everybody has equal access to these things, So they can come in there, grab what they need, use it. When they're done with it, put it back in the shed, and somebody else can use it. Therefore, there's much less need for you to make income for those to acquire those things. Not everybody has to own one of everything. We can share things. We can have an equal access system. For example, I don't know how many of you drive, but 80% of a car's lifespan on average is spent sitting somewhere. Wouldn't it be more rational to have that time that is sitting somewhere for someone else to have access to that car? I mean, wouldn't that be, again, the purpose of an economy? Economize, right? Eliminate waste, increase efficiency. It would be much more efficient in terms of resource access for people to actually be able to use what they want. When they're done with it, bring it back. So I'm not talking about an idea where everybody owns a house and not a house, but everybody owns a car. You know what I mean? I'm talking about access abundance. Everybody has access when they need it, and when they don't want it, someone else can use it, not sit somewhere. So the idea of private property is very much inefficient because it's restricted access. Someone who has the money will buy it. Someone who doesn't have the money does not have access because they don't have the money to buy it. So, transitionary ideas. Okay, I think it would be nice for everybody who has a lawn to grow vegetables, grow whatever they can. Because why should we support an unsustainable agricultural system that is destroying the planet, creating massive amounts of carbon emissions, massive amounts of food waste because we're shipping things left and right and throwing things into the ocean to keep this the market value of food high. So again, like I said, if we can grow our own food, if we can install renewable energy production into our houses, put I used to have I still have a solar panel system that I put on my roof. I used to grow vegetables. I used to have a garden. So these are transitionary ideas. But what I want to say is that the emerging future of abundance and efficiency will never be reached. The obstacle to us, again, is the current market system. You cannot expect long-term significant change to come about in the current system the way it is structured. Like I said, efficiency, sustainability, and abundance are the enemies of the market system.
Yeah, but winner-take-all economy.
Yeah, we have a small percentage of the population who taking advantage of everybody else. So let's make an example. Like New York City, right? Like most cities, this is how they're set up, in grid-like fashion. It's a grid-like fashion. You have houses over here, just in a residential district. Let's say the grocery store's over here, the hospital's here, the work is over here, and school's over here. People over here are so far from the hospital, the school, and work. You have to drive all the way to work, and typically around the time of 5 o'clock, is when people get out of work, the entire highway becomes flooded with cars. It's so inefficient. People wasting their lives sitting in traffic, waste of time, waste of energy, and most of all, waste of resources. With all these cars sitting there, they're breaking down as they're sitting down in traffic, in transit. So what a ridiculous concept to have things set up this way, where we can actually have it set up this way, circular design. And I'm terrible at drawing, by the way, so don't laugh at me. But you create a circular design for a city. You chop it up into 8 blocks. Okay. On the outer belt is energy production, renewable energy purely, and there's no need for fossil fuel, wind energy, solar, whatever you name it. On the inner belt, one inner belt is the greenhouses, production for food, vertical farms. Food is produced, residential unit right here. So the people in the residential unit right here have access, equidistant access to food is right here. Their schools are right in a circular fashion. So everybody has access to schools, and the hospital and the center will be the management system where they oversee the production and distribution process and recycling process. Obviously, the recycling is not even done remotely as good today as it should be. That's what a sane economy would be, a sane system. You preserve, you reduce the need for energy waste. The way we produce food today is
our outdated, outdoor, grid-like, again, agricultural system, where the food is produced, we irrigate water, we send water down to the food production, the water is sprinkled out, pesticides are sprinkled out because we need to continually poison our food so the insects get killed off. And the sun usually dries out all the water that we pump down all these vegetables. It dries the land over time, and the land gets destroyed, and we move to a new area and do the same exact thing. That's why we're losing tropical forest at a rate of about 16 football fields per minute right now in the world, because of this outdated, retarded agricultural system. When we can actually, instead, we can do something very sane, like, what are we doing today? Okay, there's just two different countries. This country has avocados and whatever you want. Because of the fact that the property value is lower on here, the land value is lower here, than here, let's say in America is a rich country, poor country, Mexico, whatever. The property value is lower here, so instead we go and buy land over there because it's cheaper to produce food over there. Then once we make the food over here, we put on these freight liners and ship it to America, wasting fuel, wasting and polluting the atmosphere, polluting with carbon deposits, CO2. We can actually, this is like a shoreline of a city. Let's say the shoreline of a city. There's a city over here. You have indoor vertical farms that you create a desalination process alongside the coast. Desalination cleans the water and pumps the water to automated indoor vertical farms that produce organic food. These are indoor and they're multi-level. So a very small percentage of land space can create 40, 50, 60 different types of vegetables and fruits, and can be distributed to the population. Very sane, again. These are very much outside the sphere of market, because if these ideas were implemented, there will be no market. I can guarantee you that. There will be no market, because there will be no need. There will be an abundance of food. Abundance is the enemy in the system today, right? If it started raining gold tomorrow, everybody has gold at their doorstep. The first second, everybody will running out and collecting it. But after about 10 minutes of raining gold, you probably would need a broom to sweep the gold out from your driveway, because there will be so much. So abundance actually is the enemy of the profit system. I cannot stress that enough. And lastly, a market of ideas. The market of the future will be less on exchange, because I just take that from the idea that I see on the board over there. So I'm like, you know what? Since it's talking about the idea of how a market should not be about exchange, well, how about a market of ideas, where again, production, distribution are done by machines, automated, very streamlined in production, and efficient and sustainable. And people, instead of having to toil over monotonous, boring idea of invention, creation, design, and really just the enjoyment of your life. So market of ideas will be shared. The competitive market system today hoards knowledge. So all the different companies are fighting with proprietary knowledge with each other all the time. They're hoarding and competing with each other. So inherently reducing the quality of products that are produced. Let's say if every cell phone company got together and decided to create the best cell phone you can possibly create. Imagine what an amazing world that would be if all the companies got rid of these egotism of having, oh, this is mine, this is mine. Get everybody together, collaborate. So I'm talking about a collaborative design system. That's what our economy would be. A resource-based economy, an economy of preserving and managing the Earth's resources, which is not what we're doing today. And I would say that as they invent okay, and kind of like I said, we need to have some transitionary ideas, obviously, but unfortunately, the end result of having an abundant world where people are not starving, there's no conflict, and there's no crime, that unfortunately, environmental degradation, most importantly, environmental deterioration, that will not be reached in our current system, unfortunately. So I'm just here to just plant some seeds, if you will, with you guys, and see if maybe this ideas will take hold. And I really commend all of you for doing what you're doing to spread ideas and move the world forward. And as much as these things are needed, transitionary ideas, we also need to really rethink about the world. We need to step outside the box, if you will. Step outside the box of our traditionalized norms of labor for income and everything else, and rethink the way we see the world. All right, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to analyze a Jordan Peterson interview, the one that got him famous and blew him up across the internet. Peterson is a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Toronto who gained notoriety due to his controversial views regarding social matters and society. His conservative, right-wing stance and reactionary politics have made him highly appealing, especially to young men. As a lifestyle guru to lots of young people, his main stance is that the competitive free market capitalist system, especially the Western neoliberal model, is the ideal setting upon which to run a society, and that individual self-determination is the key to success within this system. He argues that there is a biological determinism to class hierarchy, it is part of our genetic makeup, and that it is in our benefit to maintain a system that is based explicitly on social inequality, and therefore things like government assistance and social safety nets are a burden on society. According to outdated and problem-producing, since it is predicated on old world notions that do not fit into the scheme of things in the 21st century. I advocate for a new social and economic model which offers a worldview that is far different from the age-old capitalist-communist duality that has been dominating intellectual discussions for generations. And for those of you who have not been following my channel, especially Jordan Peterson fans, I want to make it clear, although there are positives in what Peterson says about people needing to own up, have discipline and structure in their lives, individual willpower can only get us so far in an economic system that limits one's opportunities due to artificial scarcity and competitive hierarchy. The data that I've collected on these issues makes it clear to me that class hierarchy is unhealthy and unproductive, and that we no longer have to have a culture where people's success have to come at the expense of others. My main criticism of his perspective and people who think like him is that they do not take a true sociological and historically accurate account of human behavior, but rather a highly flawed, socially Darwinistic view that is elitist and favors those at the very top of the pyramid. If you have a dysfunctional social system, you're gonna have dysfunctional people within it, and people on average will behave in relation to what is reinforced by the social structures that make up society. Now, one final note. Kathy Newman does not do a good job in this interview. She starts attacking him from the very beginning, trying her best to antagonize him, which actually makes her look bad and makes him look pretty damn likable. Although she makes good points about the existence of gender inequality, she does not advocate for general income equality. I strive for a world that is about general human equality and human rights, while encouraging people to express their individuality within the sphere of cultural and environmental sustainability. Anyway, with all that covered, let's start the interview.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they are certain to encounter difficult times, and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else, and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it?
Okay, so I assume by grow up, he means for people to adopt responsibility, hold themselves more accountable, and work harder towards their goals, which I completely agree with. But where I differ with all this is in realizing the impact of culture and society on people's attitudes and sense of self. It should be no mystery how much of a role culture really plays on human behavior, as well as the many subcultures and nuances that are expressed in different forms. While most people understand to some degree how we are influenced by our surroundings, they really don't take into account the largest order structural factors that could be affecting their lives without them even knowing about it. And as I'll try to make the case, if we improve the culture and environment in which people live, they will also improve as human beings.
You help people understand why it's necessary and important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility, why that isn't a shake your finger and get your act together sort of thing, but why it's more like a delineation of the kind of destiny that makes life worth living. What I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer. People have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world, and that also doing so is where you find the meaning that sustains you in life.
Yes, people do have the capacity to do great things in life, but only if they are products of a healthy environment. All people, regardless of color or creed, have certain immutable needs. Things like food, shelter, safety from harm, meaningful work and education, and a decent family life. And I say that our economic system has failed terribly at meeting human needs across the board. People are not being brought up in the conditions that would allow them to thrive and succeed in life. When 50% of the world's population lives on less than $5 a day, and 3.4 billion struggle to meet their basic life needs, and when in the US, home of the American dream, 63% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover even a $500 emergency charge, what is that supposed to tell us about our system? In this world, money brings you resources that translate to a better life. About 21% of children in the US, 15 million, live in impoverished families. And growing up poor is one of the strongest determining factors of child abuse and neglect. The toxic stress experienced by those living in poverty translates to frustration for parents that could lead to maltreatment of their children. The Adverse Childhood Experiences study has shown how every single childhood stressor can greatly impact the health and overall well-being of an individual throughout their lifespan. Deprivation is the root source of crime, mood and behavioral disorders, among other things, even so-called laziness. And don't forget that we currently live in an age where technology can allow us to produce an abundance of food and material goods to ensure that no one is deprived. Yet, due to the prevailing logic of our labor for income system, those who do not earn money should not be given what they need, even if the jobs are no longer there. So it's a socially inefficient system. And while there are always exceptions to the rule, and many people can overcome their limitations and succeed in life, that is a very small number compared to the statistical average. Therefore, until we can design a society that more efficiently meets people's needs, self-help can only take us so far.
Women deeply want men who are competent and powerful. And I don't mean power in that they can exert tyrannical control over others. That's not power. That's just corruption. Power is competence.
True power is competence, and I personally view people who are competent problem solvers to be powerful individuals. Peterson has a book called 12 Rules for Life, which is about instilling moral virtues into people. And I'd say good luck in expecting people to follow these rules if they are abused products. Again, I agree with many of his points, but the problem is people do not live in a vacuum, but rather a continuum of pressures and influences. Now, I say that we need to be pushing for a world that removes unnecessary and artificial stressors from people's lives so that they have the capacity, the chance to make the right decisions in life. And going back to competence, what good is it to demand competence from people while not having an equal expectation of competence from our social system? During a pandemic where people have lost their jobs and livelihood, the governments of the West, such as the US, bailed out failing corporations and banks while mere crumbs were given to average people. No universal health care, no nothing. Even Canada's government has done the same, giving money to those who could afford a loss while ignoring the needs of the most vulnerable. Is that competence? Was it competent for the US government to cut funds for the Pandemic Preparedness Office in order to save money? What does it say about the competence of a global system that is more willing to go to war rather than to spend that same money on education or social reform? I mean, if we're going to hold people so accountable to doing the right thing, how about we start from the very foundation of our society and work our way up from there? And here's one of the most important parts of the interview, where Kathy Newman challenges Peterson on whether we still have a patriarchal society and whether men are still favored in the workplace or not.
Simple question. Is gender equality a myth in your view? Is that something that's just never going to happen? Here in the UK, for example, let's take that as an example. The gender pay gap stands at just over 9%. You've got women at the BBC recently saying that the broadcaster is illegally paying them less than men to do the same job. So it seems to a lot of women that they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. And agreeable people get paid less than less agreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men.
So according to him, women have this inborn characteristic that makes them more agreeable than men, and this contributes to the gender pay gap, and that it's up to them to be more aggressive and fight harder to get what they want. But is it that cut and dry? Do we all need to tap into that aggressive inborn nature of ours to succeed in our society? Or are we simply being forced to abide by certain cultural rules that have been imposed upon us? Let us look at the historical data regarding gender roles. It has been discovered that before the dawn of agriculture, prehistoric societies had an egalitarian makeup, and that women had much more involvement in decision-making and leadership, suggesting that inequality was an aberration that came with the advent of farming and land ownership. So there's a clear cultural factor that has been somewhat ignored or conveniently dismissed. Riane Eisler's book, The Chalice and the Blade, provides evidence that for the past several thousand years, history has been written and rewritten by men in power so that power structures that support them can continue to exist. The Neolithic Revolution had many benefits, such as the surplus production of food and the evolution of technology. But it also signaled the end of the egalitarian setting of hunter-gatherers, transitioning us from societies based on collaboration, trust, and the sharing of resources to private property and land ownership, where governments and armies were erected to defend the property of the rich and powerful. This organization was also expressed at the gender level. The sex that could monopolize resources could also take charge of territories, family life, and ultimately control the opposite sex. And so, it was inevitable that in a system which enforced rigid social hierarchies, men would gain control through violence and oppression. This is why, generally, masculine values in our culture are strength, aggression, and independence, and women are assigned the aspects of humanity that are opposite, emotional expression, submissiveness, and the like. But these qualities are not inherent to either men or women. They are assigned to them based on the dominant cultural ideology. So while there may be a genetic component that makes women more agreeable in order to reduce conflict, we cannot overlook the effect of culturally prescribed gender rules. Agreeableness should be a desirable quality. It means the ability to work with others and be more cooperative, and to settle things diplomatically. Finland's new government is led by a young woman, and they seem to be doing pretty good. The country has some of the best income equality in the world and has exceptionally high achievements in health and education, which has contributed to women's high economic and political participation. And that's the point. Income equality actually makes society more functional and productive. Now, Kathy Newman doesn't seem to understand the cultural and economic factors behind all this, and she's simply making a scapegoat out of men, making sexist and power-hungry men to be the main issue, and ignoring the underlying systemic forces that perpetuate this tendency. By the way, income inequality is the greatest source of social destabilization in the world, and it is also responsible for the diminishment of not only women's rights, but other groups as well.
I mean, to get to the top of any organization is an incredibly competitive enterprise. And the men that you're competing with are simply not going to roll over and say, please take the position.
So let me come back to my question.
It's absolute all-out warfare.
Yep, he's absolutely right. It is all-out warfare to get to the top of this pyramid. You know the whole notion of the alpha male, the asshole who stomps on anyone and everyone on their way to the top? We live in a culture that is all about winning, not about doing what's right. In any sensible society, a true alpha male or female would be the one who helps uplift others and improve their lives. There have been a fair number of studies demonstrating that those who have issues of psychopathy do better in business, since good business etiquette requires a lack of remorse or feelings of guilt.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it means equality of outcome, then almost certainly it's undesirable. That's already been demonstrated in Scandinavia. Because in Scandinavia...
What do you mean by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable.
Well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it off their own accord. We've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law.
People really overlook the powerful role of traditionally imposed gender roles and how much of an influence they've had on male and female occupational selection. Recent discoveries have shown that in the Americas, between 40 to 50% of big game hunters were actually female. And while male nurses seem to be an anomaly, the perception that nursing is a female profession is far from a natural conclusion. Truth is that for a long while, Western culture had essentially excluded women from most professions seen as too masculine. Jobs such as nursing were seen as occupations or pastimes that were suitable to a woman's primary cultural role as a caregiver of her family. Again, the underlying cultural currents of our society are overtly ignored and dismissed by people like Peterson.
Right, so you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen. So the simple question is, do you believe in equal pay?
Well, I made the argument there. It's like it depends on
So
who
you don't
defines
believe
it.
in equal pay?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
You know, I really don't like this kind of divisive communication by her, where she keeps reframing what Peterson is saying and restating it in a way that comes out negative. She's not behaving professionally. Why don't you let the guy finish his point before projecting negativity onto him? And here we are with the most cliche statement of the entire interview. Peterson's rebuttal as to why we should not interfere with the free market.
There was a huge debate in Canadian society at that point that was basically ran along the same lines as your argument, is that if the law firms didn't use these masculine criteria, then perhaps women would do better. But the market sets the damn game. In a chess game, right, there's lots of things that you can do, although you can't break the rules of the chess game and continue to play chess.
There's this myth that the free market system is self-driven and governed by an invisible hand, which actually lends to superstitious and religious thinking. Well, the truth is that the market is operated and driven by people, and this is a society run by the ultra-rich. You might remember that Citigroup document that was leaked back in 2005. It described the US, UK, and Canada as plutonomies, countries where rule by an ultra-rich managerial class has replaced democracy. A study was done years ago by the mathematics department of Tufts University, conducting a formal analysis of market-driven behavior to see whether inequality and poverty were avoidable in a market system. And after careful review, the researchers concluded that wealth inequality is not only inevitable, but that the end result of any market system is oligarchy, where one player ends up with all the money while everyone else has virtually nothing. For anyone interested in the details of how the study was done, I've included links in the video description. Capitalism is a social design that mathematically guarantees inequality and oligarchy, and until we revise the structure, it's going to stay this way and actually get much, much worse. Now here in this final segment, Peterson argues in favor of inequality and hierarchy based on the notion of biological determinism, suggesting that human hierarchies are a result of evolution, and that any attempt to alter them is doomed to failure.
There's this idea that hierarchical structures are a sociological construct of the Western patriarchy. And that is so untrue that it's almost unbelievable. And I use the lobster as an example. We divulged from lobsters in evolutionary history about 350 million years ago. And lobsters exist in hierarchies, and they have a nervous system attuned to the hierarchy.
I don't know where to even begin with this one, but first of all, human lineage diverged from arthropods long before lobsters evolved, and lobster hierarchy clearly developed independently of any human societal structures. Second, lobsters are invertebrates, while humans are vertebrates, two completely separate groups on the phylogenetic tree, and they diverged around 500 million years ago. Even conservative estimates show that the vertebrate branch of the phylogenetic tree diverged hundreds of millions of years before the emergence of the proto-lobster. And human hierarchical structures are nothing like those of lobsters. Lobsters are obviously extremely basic animals with a very simple brain, much more influenced by body chemistry, and their hierarchy is determined by body size and aggression. Clearly, humans can and have organized their leaderships throughout history in various ways that are far different than simply who's the biggest and strongest. The existence of art, music, science, and literature all make Jordan Peterson's comparisons to lobsters utterly silly and ignorant. Yes, we have what's called the limbic system, which triggers our fight and flight response for survival. But due to the development of the neofrontal cortex, humans have had the ability to think and organize differently than primitive creatures like the lobsters. It is our current culture and economic system that brings out the worst behaviors in us. The main emotional reactions that capitalism triggers are fear and greed due to the perpetuation of artificial scarcity. These are not immutable built-in behaviors, but rather incentives that are driven by our socioeconomic orientation.
The idea of hierarchy has absolutely nothing to do with sociocultural construction.
Let me just get this straight. You're saying that we should organize our societies along the lines of the lobsters.
She's definitely right to mock him on this one. I mean, Peterson sure likes to pick and choose whatever information pushes forth his narrative, a narrative that is clearly biased and favored by all the free market priests, from Thomas Malthus and his theory of overpopulation to Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market. Look, these people were not scientists. They made highly uneducated assumptions regarding the state of the world, which justified and legitimized an established system that favored power and moneyed interests. And honestly, the ideas would be and should be laughed at by any critical thinking mind of today. And if we're going to use lobsters to support the idea of hierarchy, then how about we look at the closest genetic relatives to humans? Chimps and bonobos share 99% of their genome with humans. However, they display far different behaviors from one another. Chimps have highly brutal social hierarchies dominated by males, similar to that of post-agriculture humans. Bonobos, on the other hand, live in egalitarian societies that are governed by females, substituting sex for aggression. And what makes the difference? The environment. Chimps generally live in climates where fruit availability fluctuates radically, and therefore strict hierarchies must be maintained in order to manage scarcity. Bonobos live in lush rainforest regions that have an abundance of fruit, and similar to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, which actually allows for a vast range of behaviors and social organization. So although they are very similar in genetic structure, they are nothing alike in behavior, and that cannot be explained by mere biology.
One thing we can't do is say that hierarchical organization is a consequence of the capitalist patriarchy. It's like, that's patently absurd. It's wrong. It's not a matter of opinion. It's seriously wrong.
I mean, I really don't understand how this guy could gain such popularity, other than the fact that our culture breeds this type of narrow-minded thinking, and people who have been bombarded with misinformation are looking to further confirm their biases by turning to people like him. As long as we keep putting our faith in the hands of these so-called academics and self-help gurus, society will continue to walk blindly towards the path of self-destruction. While I'm all in support of the idea of self-development, we also need to develop a sense of social awareness and to realize that no man is an island. We all need each other to survive, and it truly takes a village, a nation, and a global consciousness to raise a child. Peace out.